like, this is a woman who really needs no introduction. The only disclaimer I have to give once again is that she is fighting allergies, so please bear with her very deep, sexy voice this morning. She's going to be talking about When Our Minds Deceive Us, a ghost story. Please help me welcome Helen Stringer.
Wow. Thanks, you guys. Yeah, I think my sexy man voice kind of wore off. I'm really sorry. If I go into a coughing fit and some other things. So yes, please bear with me. I got a bit of I think it's more of a head cold, so no snuggles. You don't want to get near me. So no, without further ado. So has anyone here had the opportunity to watch the new HBO documentary series, one show, Scientology, the Going Clear series, or read the book? Hopefully a lot of you. I actually read the book, and when this documentary came out, I was really excited because it was going to put some faces to a lot of names and also hear more really interesting stuff. Scientology is pretty fascinating, to say the least. One story in particular really caught my interest. There's a woman named Spanky Taylor, and that is her name. So it's a little odd for me to say the word Spanky in one paragraph about 5 times, but I'm going to do it. Okay, so, but her story is actually really, really incredible. It's about her escape from the Church of Scientology. Like all church employees, Spanky signed one of those billion-year contracts, pledged her life to the cause. She was, according to her own account, brainwashed, programmed, and forbidden to leave the property. When she gave birth, her baby was put in a separate location so that it would not interfere with her work with the church. One day, Spanky went to visit her daughter. The baby was malnourished, utterly neglected, and she was covered in flies, and her eyes were filled with pus and fused shut. Something finally snapped for her, and with the help of a friend, Spanky took her child, fled from her captors, and never looked back. After hearing about these instances like this, I often catch myself thinking something like, how could anyone fall for this? It sounds crazy. You would have to be stupid to agree to such things. Such torture, it's unfathomable. But then it strikes me, wait, I too have held beliefs and had experiences that could fall under the same judgments. Yes, some may be more extreme like hers, but they could all fall under the same camp. Recalling a time where I thought my house was haunted or had a demonic stronghold reminds me that I should check my arrogance at the door, because I too am human and can fall under the same mind traps. This is a picture of Spanky. So, in 2003, over a decade ago, my husband and I were proud owners of our first home. It was 45 minutes outside of Nashville, had 2.5 wooded acres, and was only a year old. We were through the roof thrilled by this American dream come true. Well, it was a dream until about a month in. One night, Larry and I were talking about something religious. I can't remember what it was exactly, the subject that we were talking about, but what I do recall is that out of nowhere, a sudden cold rush kind of filled the room. And then I had this sudden sense of dread. It was like a dark presence had entered the room. You know that feeling or sixth sense you sometimes get that something just doesn't feel right? That's pretty much what I had experienced. I voiced this feeling to Larry, and he concurred that he too experienced the same sudden rush of cold and the same sense of dread. Being the good Christians we thought we were, we immediately jumped to thinking that maybe a demonic presence was in our house, or for you non-religious folk, ghosts. So, coming out of a charismatic, conservative Christian denomination, such a notion would not be that uncommon. It was thought that demons still roamed the earth today in a continuing battle against good and evil, or so we theorized at this point in our religious journey. So we sat there and began to seriously freak out. So what does the Bible tell you to do, or rather what do religious authorities tell you to do, when you're facing the epic battle of human against demons in rural Tennessee?
Cast down.
you're a bad Christian, so you're in good space here. You pray. You pray. So that's what we did, awkwardly. You see, although we really did believe in Christianity at one point, we never felt comfortable praying with each other. We really didn't. So we went ahead and awkwardly began to pray together and began to command the demons to leave our house. Yes, weird, I know. Yes. You're gonna lose all faith in me. So. That's why I share this. Then we started to hear strange noises. Sudden sounds that made us think that maybe the demons were trying to make their presence known, or they were being disturbed by our prayers. Larry told me that he thought he heard like a weird growling sound, and I thought I heard some type of indiscernible whispers. We went to bed that night, absolutely terrified, with the assistance of Benadryl, because we had totally psyched ourselves out. In the days that followed, we thought we had observed more strange occurrences. Cabinet doors being left wide open, our dog Hottie, her name is Hottie with an H-O-T-T-I-E, she took to barking at the same corner in our house on a regular basis, and something she hadn't done in our previous apartments. The lights would actually flicker off and on. A shelf in our back spare room collapsed, and the same ominous feeling in our home remained. I even had a dream where I thought I saw this dark angel hovering over our house, like a symbol of darkness that loomed over our dream home. This led us to wonder, what was it about this house that maybe caused this possible presence? So we postulated that maybe the house was built on a burial ground, maybe it was part of the Civil War, because this is, Middle Tennessee, maybe Indians died there, like poltergeist, remember that? Not wanting anyone to think we were crazy, we told very few people about this, and now I tell you publicly. But, however, since we were feeling completely disparaged with our haunted house, we reached out to the pastors of the church we used to attend when we lived inside Nashville. When we told them what was happening, they gave us an expression like we were smoking something, but they did the good Christian thing and they prayed with us. And then they referred us to a couple that works in prison ministry and told us that they had the gift of discerning spirits and the gift of spiritual warfare. Sounds like a video game, right? God gives out gifts in the charismatic world. They have like a whole list of different giftings that you can have. So, in case you didn't know, those are two options. Those are two gifts I wouldn't want. So we contacted them and set up for them to make a 3-hour drive to our house to rid it of the demonic presence. I recall those hours leading up to their visit and remember thinking that this was like something straight out of a movie, and it turned out to be quite like that. I tend to think that M. Night Shyamalan should probably consult me for his next movie. So they arrived in a beat-up old van. Upon arrival, they told us, as they pulled into our driveway, that they could see demons running around in our yard. I can't make this stuff up, I know. You're welcome. It's a really great way to freak us out even more. So they even told us we needed to turn out the lights because that was the only way we could possibly get a chance at maybe seeing them. So it's evening, it's like winter. That's probably why the room got cold, but I'll go there in a minute. So we turn out all the lights, and then he instructs us to go room by room and to demand the demons to leave. Now, of course, the man led the way, because that's how, in those circles, that's how that works. So when we first went into the 2 spare bedrooms, we had a split house, master on one side and the 2 bedrooms on the other. So we went into the 2 spare bedrooms where he began to fiercely, in the name of Jesus, I command you to leave this house in each corner and area of every room. And then went into speaking into tongues. And if you don't know what tongues is, so in the charismatic circle, it's when you don't know how to pray. So God gives you a magical language to know how to pray appropriately. So this man was utilizing those skill sets. He also was armed with anointing oil, which he placed on the door frames of every door. He addressed every corner of both rooms with great fervor and commanding demands. As we left our second bedroom, I recall taking a second to just look back as I was walking out, and all of a sudden, I felt like I got hit in the chest. It felt very real. It felt like I got the wind knocked out of me. I told I don't remember their names, this is how bad that is. I told the couple who came to the house what had happened. He proceeded to tell me that a demon probably had just tried to possess me, but it was okay, because I was a child of God, and I had Jesus in my heart. So it was an unsuccessful hit, you know, because your heart's right here. But totally freaked me out. So he went room by room and continued to demand the demons to leave. He went through literally every bathroom. He even prayed into our kitchen cabinets. This man even went into the woods to demand the demons to leave, because I guess he'd saw them out there, so he probably should address them too. I can only imagine what our neighbors thought as they possibly overheard or saw all this going on. Fortunately, we had lots of land, so they were kind of distanced. That couple left that night giving us the instructions that we may need to carry out this ritual on a regular basis, because the house may have been built on land that was desecrated, whatever that means. Nothing like a good parting gift of dread. They even called us a few days later to tell us that some of the demons from our house had gotten into their van, causing them, it gets better, causing them to have to pull over on the side of the road to demand the demons to leave. So they're on the highway going home, and they had to pull over and do some more praying. I call that the icing on the cake. What eventually transpired was the lessening of feeling like our house was haunted. Even after that night, we still thought we experienced random supernatural phenomena. In a strange way, I came to accept that our house had some issues, but fear and concern over it just kind of lessened over time. And I have never experienced anything like that in any other place or time in my life, or even since then. Now, being on this end of the religious spectrum, I can easily explain what we experience in our house, because I also need to redeem myself for you now. So, number one, our minds are incredibly powerful and easily taken over by the power of suggestion and confirmation biases. During this time, we were both studying the problem of evil, one of the apologetic issues that started our journey towards non-theism. During this time, we were studying, I have a book, it's beautiful. This was actually one of, I went to Greg Boyd's church when I was in college, but this was one of the texts that we were reading at the time, Greg Boyd's Satan and the Problem of Evil. And even on this front cover, there's this picture, which this picture is the edge of this piece of artwork right here. The front cover has a small part of this picture of heaven and hell. The cover image, this one in particular, still happens to be like the default image when people talk about hell. I kind of, for some reason, picture this piece of artwork, which is on this front cover. It is no wonder we thought our house was haunted or demon-possessed, considering we were studying and looking into this subject matter. I actually did my undergraduate final project on the problem of evil, which I was studying a lot of theological ideas on hell. Confirmation bias was also at play. Confirmation bias, if you don't know, describes our tendency to confirm our existing beliefs. If I think there are demons in the world, which I don't now, don't worry, but if I do think there are demons in the world, I will naturally look to confirm my belief. The events that occurred in our house were also a form of confirmation bias that kind of snowballed out of control. Secondly, I can also explain the phenomena we thought we were experiencing as demonic presence. So first, those cabinet doors that were left open, well, it just so happens that I tend to leave cabinet doors open. You can ask my husband. I have a really weird habit. We were newly married at this time too, so I have a strange habit. I don't know why, but sometimes they just don't get shut. And so I probably left the cabinet doors open. Maybe it's because I was super tired from the stress of thinking my house was haunted, but I probably left those cabinet doors open myself. Our dog, Hottie, barking at the corner. You know, dogs have a pretty strong sense of hearing. Who knows what she thought she was hearing, but I'm not quite sure what Satan's minions really care to do with my dog. It's kind of the last thing I think as a pointer to something being in my house. To this day, she likes to sit in the middle of our yard and bark randomly at the air. So I assume she's probably possessed by a demon, so that's probably what it is. The light's flickering. I assume we have faulty wiring in that house. This was the first house that builder had ever built, and it was a really quick build from what we understand. So who knows what mistakes were made when they were building that house. The shelf falling in the back room. That's called physics. When you put too much weight, I know, it's earth-shattering. When you put too much weight on a shelf, and it's not designed to hold that load, it's going to fall. The sounds of groaning and whispers. Our minds are great at running with those suggestions. Did you know that Benadryl itself actually can cause auditory hallucinations? For a good time. In my layman opinion, our mind fabricated those sounds. I remember watching the end of It's a Beautiful Mind. Remember that movie? I think it's Russell Crowe. And thinking, holy crap, what if I think that the people around me, or what if the people around me are a fabrication of my, within my mind? And there's like a philosophical term for all that. I don't go there. But I remember thinking that would just be like hard to ever fathom. Schizophrenia, in my opinion, is just one example of how our brains can deceive us. Now granted, I'm fairly certain, although you might be up for debate, I'm not schizophrenic, but I'm fairly certain that I started to hear what I thought would sound like demons and what Larry thought. And what was interesting, and I don't know why we didn't catch on to it then, but we both thought different things. So he thought he heard one thing and I heard the other. So you think if they were putting out the same sounds, we would have heard the same thing, but no. So lastly, when that couple came to our house to rid it of demons, I experienced that hit in the chest. I now figure that it was the result of sheer stress. Who knows, my heart could have skipped a beat, or the adrenaline rush could have caused a physiological response, which felt like getting hit in the chest. When you're under extreme stress, your body reacts in strange ways. Philosophers, economists, and social scientists had assumed for centuries that human beings are rational agents. However, Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel laureate and professor of psychology at Princeton, has now demonstrated that we're not nearly as rational as we'd like to believe. Joan O'Leary shared in a New Yorker article called "Smart People Are Stupid" that, quote, when people face an uncertain situation, they don't carefully evaluate the information or look up relevant statistics. Instead, their decisions depend on a long list of mental shortcuts, which often lead them to make foolish decisions. He also shared that in a study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, which was led by Richard West and Keith Stanovich, that in many instances, smarter people are more vulnerable to thinking errors. I know, let that soak in. I know you guys are shocked. Smart crowd. Although we assume that intelligence is a buffer against bias, it can actually be a subtle curse. Contrary to what we may think, self-awareness is also not particularly helpful. As the scientists noted, quote, people who are aware of their own biases were not better able to overcome them. Kahneman, who, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, Kahneman, who admits, thank you, Daryl, that was you, right? I heard the voice from above. He wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and that his decades of groundbreaking research have failed to significantly improve his own mental performance. He stated, my intuitive thinking is just as prone to overconfidence, extreme predictions, and the planning fallacy as it was before I had made study of these issues. Lear also shared that one of the most dangerous bias is that we naturally assume that everyone else is more susceptible to thinking errors, a tendency known as the bias blind spot. We excel at noticing the flaws in others, and in turn are unable to spot those mistakes in ourselves. So although the bias blind spot isn't a new concept, West's latest paper demonstrates that it applies to every single bias under consideration. In each instance, we readily forgive our own minds, but harshly upon the minds of others. So why do I share all this with you? Because I want to humor you, partly. But I share this with you because it's been a reminder to myself to be humble. We are all human. We are all susceptible to fallacies and biased thinking. There isn't a single person in this room who can exclude themselves from this reality. We all come from different backgrounds and experiences, and as a community of compassion, we must balance the expectation that our lack of religious belief or practices makes us a better form of human, because it doesn't. What makes us great people is our humanism, our compassion for one another. We can't treat others as less than because they don't do religion. That's not compassionate or caring or any expression of humanism. All we can do is what I assume many of us already aim to do, the best we can with the cards we've been dealt. To make the most of moments that really count to help leave the world a better place than it was when we got here. A dose of humility and understanding can go a long way towards achieving that goal. Thanks. I have time for questions, which kind of makes me nervous. Okay, I saw it here.
Who were those people?
I don't know. I don't know. It's really sad. I even asked Larry, I'm like, do we remember their names? They came, so we were living in Tennessee, they came from Kentucky. I don't remember. They were like ghosts in the night. I saw Brian's hand next, sorry. Brian?
How long did you keep doing those rituals until you gave it up?
See, this is where I should probably... What'd you say, Larry?
Atheist 2 years later.
We were atheists 2 years later, ironically enough. Maybe we're possessed now. That's what they'll probably say. Marla, sorry, I saw Marla stand up here. Oh, they didn't charge us. Fortunately, they didn't charge us anything. So we gave them the demons in their car on their way home. We did not pay them. I have no recollection of that. Okay. Larry says we paid them. Maybe it was. They drove really far. We kind of felt bad. So I get, okay, we did. It makes me feel better as a human being. I mean, you have someone come to your house to help you. You know, you feel like, okay, so we did pay them. Thanks, Larry. Oh, Matt.
When you sold your home, did you feel a responsibility to inform the new owners?
Okay, so it's kind of funny. That house has had like a lot of owners since then. But let me seriously, guys. I mean, I highly doubt that's the reason why. But we only take a field trip to Tennessee. No, we did not disclose that because, we don't legally have to do that. No one was murdered there that we're aware of. Yeah.
What do you think of Catholic, what's the word? Exorcism?
Well, it's a load of crap is what I think at this point in time. But at that point in time, we weren't Catholic. I feel like exorcism is, well, that's not true. I would say it's hard. I mean, obviously I don't believe in it now. I think it's hysteria that people fall into. But the Pentecostal background that we came out of, they definitely believed that people could be possessed and they would pray over them and stuff. I never did that. Does that make it better? I never prayed anyone like that. So yeah.
Out of curiosity, did they was the indication that you should do this often? Did that come after you paid them?
I don't know.
The other question is, would you consider the people that came and did this to be exploiting you guys?
I think they had the best of intentions, 100. They thought they were being really helpful. So, no. And honestly, I can say hands down, I never felt like I encountered anyone who was trying to take advantage for any reason like that at all. So most of the Christians that I ever met, like, we really sincerely believed in it, you know, although it's somewhat embarrassing to this point, but, you know, we're human. So, no, they were trying to help.
Yeah, as a person who came from the same background, kind of the holiness movement and such, how do you think, or in my case, I spoke in tongues. Had you done that before? And if so, what's your interpretation of what was happening during that time?
Did I ever speak in tongues? He said he came out of a similar background, and he said he himself had done speaking in tongues in the assemblies of God is considered to be a physical evidence that you are filled with the Holy Spirit. So, in other words, I was told in school that Billy Graham could have been a much better Christian if he had accepted the full Holy Spirit and taken on the gift of tongues. So, I never did in a public setting. I think I thought I could mumble, and I could probably, if I had a few drinks, I'm pretty sure I could speak in tongues. Next bar night! But I never participated in either, like, because some of them have they'll have a church service, and then someone will stand up out of nowhere and start speaking in tongues, and then another person interprets, because God sends one person to gibber, and then the other one, someone else finds out what that was actually being said and gives the word of God. So, yeah, you know, there's a fascinating thing. Michael Shermer's book, I think, The Believing Brain, I think that's where it was. They did neurological studies on what's happening neurologically when people speak in tongues. And it's actually, I think, if I remember this right, so hopefully I'm not off, Daryl, but that people kind of literally turn off their brain, big shocker, when you're doing that. And you can kind of speak in gibber as you kind of, that part of your brain is what's active. So does that answer your question in a roundabout way? Yeah.
I'm having trouble visualizing, and I think in the future, if you get this speech again, I think you and Larry should demonstrate you praying together.
It's hard to visualize because it rarely ever happened. So that's what I mean. This is why we're atheists today. We didn't pray together enough, huh? You know. So.
Thank goodness.
Amen. Yes. Right.
So, I know that, for example, like, I grew up in a Christian setting as well, and I never experienced any of these supernatural things, and so, therefore, I never really felt like I was buying into anything. Do you think experiencing something like that either further solidified that belief for you, and then how did you, I guess, come to reasoning out of something that was so profound?
So two things. Okay, so he said he came out of that, but never really felt like he had the experience, which is one of those things that's kind of hard when you're talking with Christians, because it's difficult to argue with someone's experience. I think, let's see, I fell into, when I started going to the Assemblies of God, I was 17, and a lot of that stuff, when you have groupthink, and I know a lot of people are scared of groupthink, but you have a lot of that at play, in my opinion. So you have like group kind of hysteria going on, so you have these big services, people are praying, and you kind of get wrapped up in that, and then you kind of start buying into it. We basically, I mean, my story, and even Larry's, we reasoned our way out of a lot of things. So when we started, one of our biggest hang-ups initially was this problem of evil. How can you have this all-loving God in the New Testament and this really horrendous things happening in the Old Testament? Well, you can't rectify the two, in my opinion. And Greg Boyd is actually one of the theologians, amazing, brilliant man, but we noticed that he spent his life trying to work from, unfortunately, this is one of the elements that did it for me, working from a premise, and he was trying to prove it, saying, you know, that this, you know, Old New Testament dichotomy. But basically, it was just, we reasoned I mean, like I can right now, like in retrospect, I'm like, well, that's probably what was happening, and now we have neuroscience has taught us so much about what, you know, we're still learning so much, but it kind of helps you know that, you know, we can imagine all kinds of good stuff. Oh, JJ, sorry. Aww. What's up, JJ?
So, because I know for, like, as you said, nobody in this room is exempt. I can think of examples in my past where I've been really dead set on a paradigm. And then, of course, you know, I've changed to a massive amount of research. But in your research on this subject, have you come across, say, processes that have been proposed so that people can more easily recognize when they're committing a bias?
No, I don't. I don't have that answer. I just don't. That's not. I haven't gotten there yet. So, am I? I don't know. See, that's safe to say in this room, right? I don't know. Yeah.
So, me myself, I used to be a Christian,
Huh?
pretty fundamentalist one, and after you are not a Christian anymore, you have that problem of fear, like now there's nothing. So how do you deal with that? How your husband deal with that?
Larry, we come from very different backgrounds, so I don't know if it's appropriate. He came from he felt free, and I think I had the flip side because he grew up in a very heavy fundamentalist, like scary, like kind of like literally scare you with hell kind of childhood. I didn't. My parents are great, so they're here today. So I'm trying to blanket that. They are great. You know what's really sad is that my parents had no clue about any of this. So like this went on in Tennessee, and I wasn't going to tell them. They would have totally thought I was crazy. They probably do right now, but I didn't tell them. So I wasn't raised in it, and was 17, kind of really got pulled into it. And for me, I was slightly like, hell was never much of a real concept for me. Did not become a Christian because I was scared of hell. I became a Christian because I thought Jesus was the best way to live a good life. So I didn't have that, but it was more when your worldview kind of shifts, and I did have a realization. I remember where I was driving in my car when I fully realized that I didn't believe any of that anymore. Like it was, all this was a small culmination of, years, but for me it just took time to piece, like you just kind of like putting new pieces of a new puzzle together then. So now, what's interesting, like now I was never super afraid of the dark or anything like that, but I'm not worried about any of that stuff. Like you could put me in one of those old mental hospitals, as long as there isn't like a crazy axe murder or human being that's gonna come kill me in there, I'm not that worried about. I really sincerely don't have any like fears of that. I'm more afraid of like what humans will do, because we're well aware of what we're capable of doing. So, yeah.
Just more like kind of half a comment, half a question. It's interesting with the confirmational bias, and for us to sort of, we a lot of us have a common background through some Judeo-Christian belief system in us, our sort of, like we said, and honestly, we're kind of laughing at it, kind of confirming our own belief system right now, how that sort of a false paradigm kind of thing. Sort of like taking and turning the sort of lens at ourselves and saying, how are we currently experiencing that confirmational bias, and how are we to try to better ourselves as a people for when we, get in a rut of our own belief system, that's bad, instead of sort of trying to say, well, maybe it's not as bad as we think it is. How do you think we would be a good way of, turning that lens on us and sort of identifying when we're victims?
Go see a therapist? I don't know. Well, hold on. I think it's sometimes hard to see our own bias. So, one, maybe having good friends that can help reflect back what's going on in our lives. But honestly, I think a lot of it is just always, I think and that's kind of why I brought up, like for me, it was like realizing I need to be humble. So it's not we can try our hardest, and that's what some of the research was showing. We can try with all our might, but sometimes it's hard to overcome. The foundation of it is just a matter of my hope for myself is that when I seek to understand each person, so that means listening. I try to be a really good listener, and then trying to always be as humble as possible. And so when I see things like this, remind myself that I once too, had fallen into that we're human. That's really the only approach that I can go with that. But I don't really have a prescription for countering confirmation bias right now. necessarily. One more. So if, I saw someone else that was eagerly, yeah, okay.
I'm just curious how old you guys were.
Oh,
Because that does affect people's.
well, Larry's brain wasn't fully developed yet, so he was 23. We were 23. As mine, I forgot when our brains are fully developed, but 25 for guys, and yeah. So. All right, well, thank you all. Appreciate it.